Sir Charles Kingsford Smith set and broke many records and reached many individual achievements. As well as being an Australian hero, he also inspired and captured a nation. He was born in Hamilton, near Brisbane in Queensland in 1897. He was the youngest of 7 children. He lived with his parents, William Charles Smith and Catherine Mary Kingsford, where he gained the names Charles Kingsford Smith. On the 2nd of January 1907, he nearly drowned at Bondi Beach. He was saved by some bathers who were later responsible for founding the world's first official surf lifesaving group. Once Charles was old enough, he enlisted for World War I and was immediately sent for Egypt for training. After serving at Gallipoli with Australian and New Zealanders, he then rode as a dispatch rider in France, where he saved many lives. In 1917, he was transferred to the British Flying Corps, where he flew his first aeroplane. While serving with No. 23 Squadron, Kingsford Smith was shot down by 2 German fighters in August 1917. The German fighters fired over 200 bullets into his aeroplane, with some penetrating and going into his foot. 3 toes were amputated. Afterwards, he was awarded the Military Cross. He was granted leave to Australia for his expected long recovery. After gaining his commercial pilot's license in June 1921, he and Charles arrived in the United States and bought a Fokker FVII 3M monoplane and named it the Southern Cross. On the 31st of May 1928, Kingsford Smith and co-pilot Charles along with Americans James Warner, who was the radio operator, and Captain Harry Lyon, the navigator and engineer, left California, attempted the first trans-Pacific flight to Australia. The flight was broken up into 3 stages. The first stage, from California to Hawaii, which took 27 hours. They then flew to Fiji, which took 34 hours. Then lastly, they flew to Sydney via Brisbane, and this took around 20 hours. A crowd of 300,000 people greeted Smith and his crew, including the state governor and the governor general. They were all greeted like heroes. The entire flight took 83 hours and 38 minutes. In August 1928, Kingsford Smith and Charles made the first non-stop flight from Melbourne to Perth. Later that year, he completed the first round trip from Sydney to Christchurch. He wanted the government to introduce regular airmail between the 2 countries. In 1929, Kingsford Smith flew from Sydney to London in a record-breaking time of 12 days and 18 hours. After surviving an aeroplane crash in mudflats of the far northwest of Australia and surviving on coffee alone, he then later made the first world's round-trip flight in 1929. He flew from London to New York, San Francisco, through China and back to London again. The flight took 12 days and 18 hours. In 1930, he won the England to Australia air race, flying in 9 days, 22 hours, Avro avian plane, he named the Southern Cross Jr. The year later, Anthony Fokker declared him the greatest man flying in the world today. Later that year, he was the first to carry mail from Australia to England. Kingsford Smith was given a knighthood in 1932 for his outstanding contributions to flight. He broke the England to Australia record in 1933, flying in a time of 7 days and 4 hours. Later that year, it was said that he held the most world records for long-distance flights. As a result of this, he was placed on Australia's $20 note and the $1 coin. Between 1933 and 1934, Smith flew from Australia to New Zealand countless times and each time breaking his last record. In 1934, Smith flew a Lockheed Altair plane called the Lady Southern Cross and made the first ever east-to-west crossing of the Pacific, flying from Australia to America. Most people admire Smith for his bravery. However, other pirates criticized him for his dangerous flights. The death of Kingsford Smith has never been resolved as why it occurred, but in 1935, Smith was heading back from England, and somewhere over the Bay of Bengal near Burma, Smith crashed. His plane was recovered, but his body was never found. It is said to be due to his fear of the ocean that he was distracted and crashed. When the war ended, most Australians had never seen an aeroplane. The development of the aviation in Australia grew rapidly relative to population than anywhere else in the world. Charles Kingsford Smith broke and held more records for intercontinental and transocean flights than any other aviators of his time. He helped develop and lay the foundations for commercial flights between an isolated Australia and the rest of the world. Sydney's International Airport has been named after Kingsford Smith in honour of his achievements.
In flying Aussie will never be at a loss while we're suns like the